Oh,
They're
yeah.
citizens, not just money makers. And I wrote a piece about Plato and his analysis of how a tyrant emerges out of democracy. And one of the crucial conditions for Plato is that the ruling elite becomes more interested in money than they do in the survival of their own republic. And
Yeah.
those conditions are absolutely in place. And that's a absolutely classic example where one of the members of the elite with lots of money says, I am going to call out the other members of the elite and I am going to represent you.
Right.
And I am going to expose them. And there's an element in which Trump has exposed the bankruptcy of Republican and Democratic neoconservative foreign policy. He's exposed the bankruptcy of a globalist economic policy that has no concern whatsoever for many people in this country who smell the condescension and who rightly are repelled by it. And my view is that if the elites don't hear this and don't adjust their own behavior, make some bloody sacrifices, then Trump is just the beginning of a populist radical movement that threatens the entire country. Similarly, if the elites don't understand the danger this kind of income inequality will do to a democracy,
Yeah.
then they're going to lose that democracy and they're going to lose their free markets.
I share the view that wealth inequality is a huge problem. And when I wrote about it, sometime around the time of the financial collapse, I was amazed at the vitriol that I got back in defense of, no ethical concern at all around wealth inequality. I mean, just people, and this was, I'm sure these were not especially wealthy people attacking me. There's this very strange religion of the self-made person in America
And look,
where,
in general, I'm very sympathetic to that view. But look, when that leads to a situation, and it hasn't always happened. There have been many situations in which this hasn't happened, in which the ability to earn lots of money has been great for
mm,
everybody. But when a combination of globalized economics, massively increased benefits to people who are smart in this economy,
mm,
the massive sorting and sifting of the population, in which large numbers of able people are moving into super zip codes, in which we've created this bubble that is essentially exploitative of the rest of the country, then you're in real danger of tipping the entire system upside down. I mean, I think conservatives of all people, conservatives who want to conserve our free market system and our democratic system, need to be more concerned than anybody else about this kind of wealth and income inequality, because it will destabilize and delegitimize the entire system. And what we're living in right now is clearly a moment in which the entire system is illegitimate in the views of many Americans. Now, Trump has amped this up to 11 in a way that is utterly irresponsible,
yeah,
reckless, and fact free. But that there is a ground for this, that there is a real reason for this resistance, is is undeniable, and I think we need to get real about that.
yeah. Well, also the way that technology is of necessity dragging us into a future, which could be a very good future if we play our cards right, where there are jobs that are disappearing that are never coming back, and they're not going to be replaced by new jobs.
And people know this; they're not fools. They're living in the way that people like you and me are not living in some ways, on the edge of this abyss.
Yeah.
They can see their futures disappearing,
I
and
mean,
it's not because they're
just this morning, Tesla just released a video of the next generation of cars. So this is literally a car that's available now, right? That is fully autonomous. So that, I mean, you see this car leave the garage, drive on side streets, stop at stop signs, avoid pedestrians, recognize red lights versus green lights, drop its occupant off at an office at Tesla, and then go find an empty parking space. Driverless cars are here.
And what they're going to do, when you look at white working class men in this country, so many of them are involved in driving
Yeah,
things.
yeah, it's the most common profession apparently
Yeah,
for
and
white men
and
in this country.
and the truth is that people look at the elites and say, "Who's really worried about this? Who there is really listening to us?" And the truth is, almost no one is. I mean, you think I take NAFTA. NAFTA I supported, and I think in general it has been a good thing. But that it has had extraordinarily disparate impact in this country, that some populations have lost leverage, clout, and income because of it is undeniable. And the fact that these economists didn't really predict that, and if so far as they did predict it, didn't really take it that seriously. Well, they would have if it were their jobs. And I think the isolation increasingly of the elites and the distance between them and most people in this country has led people to feel there's no one who can represent their voice there, that no one represents their interests. And I think it's incredibly important that they hear that this is something that is concerned, which is so that even though you could make an argument for, say, TPP, you have to acknowledge that politically and socially, this country it may be not able to absorb this kind of rapid change, that it may need to slow it down for the sake of our social stability, for the sake of our political integrity. And that's what you're seeing in Britain, for example, where Brexit happened, which is a perfectly, in my view, and here you didn't have you'd have a couple of loony demagogues like Boris and a barrage of Nigels, but no, there wasn't a Trump figure, there wasn't, and this was a genuine feel that the elites in this country are doing things with no regard for many of their fellow citizens. That's pushed Britain into an existential crisis at this point, and I think we ignore those trends at our peril. We have to figure out how to address them. The paradox is, of course, we don't know how to address this question. We don't currently have an answer to this problem.
Well, one, to take the point I just raised about the progress of technology, I mean, clearly, at a certain point, once we arrive at the actual end of human drudgery. I mean, when you have self-driving cars, and not only is there no need for ape-driven cars, you would have to be irresponsible to let an ape drive a car because they're so much worse at it, right? It'll be illegal to drive your own car, and it should be, because right now 30,000 people or 35,000 people die every year reliably because of how bad we are at driving cars. So at a certain point, the machines are going to steal jobs that aren't coming back, and we have to break this connection, this pseudo-ethical connection between work and having a claim on your own survival in society, right? So the idea that if you don't work, you shouldn't be able to eat, which is where a lot of people, ironically, a lot of the people who would vote for Trump or who will vote for Trump are people who look across the way at their shiftless neighbor and think, if you don't work for it, you don't deserve anything. I don't want any of my tax dollars going to support your shiftless lifestyle. Well, at a certain point, I mean, it's an understandable way of thinking, but at a certain point, we will arrive in a world where, again, only if we play our cards right, we will arrive in a world where there's so much wealth and so much automation of boring jobs that there will not be enough productive things to do, and we'll be left with just creative and fun things to do, and people will still have to be paid for that.
No, the trouble is that not everybody's capable of being creative.
So you need a universal basic income, or you need something that you need a safety net that gets better and better and better the more wealth gets created.
That's actually the best argument for Obamacare, that one of the things you can actually do to help people in the situation is give them health care that works,
Right.
That's an actual way of making, but the deeper problem, Sam, is that work makes people happy. It gives them meaning. It makes them feel productive. It makes them feel as if they're worth something.
So then we need a cultural renaissance that values that very principle of mastering some craft, getting good at it, and doing it. But ultimately, we will have to break the connection between doing that and surviving, because there's no need. I mean, the alternative is just wealth inequality of a sort we have never witnessed before.
Yes, but that's going to be, certainly within the Protestant work ethic of the United States, going to be a huge cultural and psychological shift that I'm not sure we're capable of achieving. And you see in these communities around the country, first of all, you see a dropping labor force participation by working age men all over the place. And working age young men who have nothing to do except go on video games is not a good thing. for the society as a whole. It decouples also marriage and taking care of kids as something that you can take pride in because you are the provider. And again, we're talking about people's psyches here. We're not talking about simply economics. And I worry about this. I also worry about, and here we will disagree, about the collapse of real religious communities around the country and traditional religion, because that did give people meaning and direction, just as the idea of the nation gives people meaning and connection. And, Marx said religion is the opiate of the people, but you know what? These days, opiates are the opiate of the people. And at some level, unless you have a cultural shift in which people can have meaning in their lives and have self-worth, that's not going to be simply about surviving, but about something else, then you're going to have a psychological and social problem that's going to get worse and worse. And we're seeing now patterns of behavior and patterns of family life in rural America that's very closely correlated with some of the more disastrous patterns in the past and currently in the present in inner cities in this country. And this is a huge problem. I agree. I think a universal basic income is probably one way to go, but it's just the beginning. It's not the end of this. And it's incredibly hard. And no one is really talking about this, and yet people are deeply anxious about it. And I think that's the discrepancy between, when you look at this country right now, it's doing really, really well, actually. Certainly if you compare it to any other advanced economy, the United States is the country you would bet on. And yet its people are clearly, large numbers of its people are deeply unhappy.